Hello, and welcome to Academic Perspectives on Conspiracism, a podcast about the research that's being done on the place of conspiracy theories in society, culture, and politics. Each episode is a conversation with an academic about their research on a different aspect of conspiracism. I'm Adam Coper, a postdoctoral fellow with the Wales Institute of Social and Economic Research and Data here at Cardiff University. This week, we'll be discussing the place of conspiracy theories in Turkish politics, focusing in particular on the idea of the deep state, an idea that originated in Turkey before spreading to the US and more recently the UK. My guest this week is Dr Türkay Salim Nefes, a Ramón y Cajal research fellow at the Institute of Public Goods and Policies at the Spanish National Research Council. He's a sociologist who has studied conspiracy theories about the COVID-19 pandemic, the idea of the deep state, and anti-Semitism in Turkey. He's also the author of the book Online Anti-Semitism in Turkey. Welcome, Türkay. Is there anything I missed from that, or is that like a good summary?
I think congratulations on perfect pronunciation. And
thank you.
Both Turkish and Spanish words. And thanks for having me.
Thanks. So I guess I'm going to just start by asking, how did you get interested in this particular topic of conspiracy theories in the kind of Turkish context?
I was interested in because there was a very famous book, very prominent, a very widespread book called Efendi in Turkey. And basically, in my neighborhood, I saw people reading it, and I never see people reading anything. And then all of a sudden, I saw them reading a book. And then I started asking them. I was just a master's student in political science, and I asked them, what are you reading? And they talked about the depths of the book to me, which was fascinating to me. I said, how come these people who I never see reading, and then they know so they have the deep knowledge of all these conspiracy theories from that book. So I took it as a topic, and then I basically studied it as my master's thesis was the impacts. I interviewed these people, by the way, and then this became a basis of my master's thesis, the impacts of popular anti-Semitic conspiracy theory books in Turkey. Then from then onwards, I became more fascinated on the topic, and it developed from there.
And so was this book specifically an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory book?
Yes, it was a book called Efendi. Efendi in Turkish means master. And basically, it's the books in its cover said, and it was a very, very popular book, by the way. It was the bestseller book and they also published the second version, and two of them were bestsellers back in the 2000s. And basically, when I in Turkey, and when I and the book's basic idea was there's a group of secret Jews, like a dönmes, basically. They are ruling the Turkish society, but they don't, but then they pretend to be Turks. So it's a crypto-Judaic society that is secretly ruling Turkey. And then they were basically, the book was based on an idea that on the surnames, the following surnames, and basically thinking that these surnames should be from the crypto-Judaic community called Dönmes in Turkey, Conversos in Turkey. So basically, that was the main idea. It was quite popular. And actually, in the same period, that book also featured in some of the films in Turkey. I saw one of the very famous series. There was the book was actually visible, so it became a kind of basically, as a sociologist, by undergraduate degree, I was very interested in that social phenomenon.
Right, and I just want to pick up on that term that you used, the dönmes. Can you explain a bit, dönmes? Can you say a bit more about what that group is?
Actually, Dönme is a crypto-Judaic community. There's a community called Dönmes. Dönme in Turkish and in English means convert. And basically, this is a group of followers of a Jewish messianic movement in the Ottoman Empire, basically. In the 17th century, this was basically the biggest messianic movement in Jewish history that took place mainly in the Ottoman Empire by someone called Shabtai Sevi. And he was followed by many. And basically, the Ottoman Empire, when he became very popular, obviously Orthodox Jews were not happy about this messianic movement. and they complained. And then this was a growing social movement in the 17th century. And basically, Ottoman emperor took him to court, forced him to convert. I mean, not forced him willfully, but he said basically, we will throw you some arrows, and if you don't die, then we will basically think that you will be a messiah. We will believe in you. But if you die, then you are not a messiah anyway. So, and here's another option. You could convert to Islam, and then we forget about this. And then basically what happened was basically he converted to Islam, and his followers, the minority of his followers, followed his conversion to Islam. But basically this was a not wholehearted conversion to Islam. He continued to believe in his messianic ideas. And his minority of followers who also converted to Islam after his conversion also followed his beliefs, but secretly. They formed a crypto-Judaic community, and this community continues to live in Turkey, actually. But then they keep themselves secret, and then they publicly they show themselves as Turks, but then they believe in the messianic ideas of Shabtai Sevi. And this group continues, and there's this existence of this secret society, very small in numbers now, but the book basically stated that following some of the known members of this society from 19th century, conspiracy theory books in Turkey that I mentioned, basically they thought that these people are like the rulers of Turkey today are descendants of this group. And then hence the idea that actually Turkey is basically secretly ruled by Jews. So it was the main, sorry, like a long explanation, but it has been it was a long historical story, basically.
So just to clarify, it's a real group of people,
yes.
but then all of these kind of conspiracy theories, really broad conspiracy theories, have been sort of like built up around this group.
Yeah, who could they be? Who could they be? Like the conspiracy theories play with the idea that the rulers are from their descendants, but nobody could come out and say no, because the group is secret by nature. But then it's a kind of small community.
Right. And I guess it's one of those things where it's totally unfalsifiable as well, that if you accuse somebody of belonging to the group and they say they're not, then that's what somebody would say if they were part of the secret group.
Exactly. And actually, to be honest, because it's part of their religious beliefs to remain secret. But I think after a decade after my research, actually, I was invited to their secret, like a Facebook group. So there's I met the members of this community, and they are totally Turkish, basically secular Turkish citizens from any political ideas. They are normal citizens like myself. So, but because of their past and idea and being secret group, the conspiracy theories are revolved around them.
Right. Wow, that's really impressive. I didn't know they'd have an online group.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting when I was reading, actually, I know we should be talking about the deep state at some point, but I'm really interested in this this idea of these conspiracy theories about the Dönmez as well. That one thing that I found particularly interesting was the way that you sort of linked it to Turkish history and the sort of fall of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of the Turkish Republic, right? And there was a term that I think came up in the chapter that I read by you. That was I can't say it because there we go. Another language I have to do with Serb syndrome.
No,
and I was just wondering,
French,
could you explain what is the Serb syndrome?
Sure. Serv basically is a city or a town. I think it's a city in Switzerland where Ottoman Empire, it was the signature at the end of the First World War, in which basically the Ottoman Empire collapsed, was signed in that town. That's why it's called Serv Treaty, and therefore it was a big trauma in Turkish history. And the background to this is basically Ottoman Empire. It was a huge empire, and around 3 continents: Africa, Europe, and Asia. And in last 200 and 300 years of Ottoman Empire, until the end of the First World War, basically Ottomans gradually lost their territory, and the entire basically anxiety in the empire was to stop that for 300 years. And it was wars against colonial powers and the independence movements of the minorities of the Ottomans at that time. And this basically, this project, 300 years failed. And at the end of the First World War, Ottoman Empire like basically gradually collapsed. And basically, if you compare the territory, actually they lost 80% of the territory in 300 years. So it's like a suddenly like gradually shrinking empire, and all the effort was to prevent that, and it failed. And at the end of it, basically, in the Serf Treaty became a very it collapsed the empire, and there was Turkish independence movement. There was an independence war which established the modern Turkey now. So basically, and then they basically looked back to Serf Treaty as a Serf syndrome, as a traumatic event, basically fall of the empire due to the wars against minorities, because minorities, basically minorities independence movements, and colonial powers, like Western powers mainly. So that became a kind of fear in Turkish political culture. And if you look at, for example, the Turkish national anthem, the first line starts with "Fear not." Basically, there's an anxiety there, like "Fear not,"
Right.
for the crimson flag that proudly ripples in this twilight shall not fade. Basically, the first line of the Turkish national anthem says actually the anxiety about like a collapse, because it says, "Don't worry, the flag will not go down again." So, and this is, and we are assured this. And most of the conspiracy theories are actually based on this traumatic history. And this is basically, this story is basically told to everyone in Turkey in national curriculum, in education. So everybody knows that, you know, like the empire collapsed because of the wars against the minorities and the colonial powers. So that created a very good environment for conspiracy theories to prevail. And most of the prominent conspiracy theories use that. And the Dönme community is a perfect victim for that, because this is a secret community and they are not Turkish and they are inside Turkey. So they could be one of those groups that could be basically stabbing you at the back, you know, like from the Serf syndrome perspective. It's a minority, they hide themselves. And most of actually in my PhD, I interviewed the popular authors of conspiracy theories about the Dönmes. And they all told me, like they always ask the same question to me. They said, if they are innocent, why are they secret? Why are they hiding themselves? They could just come out, you know, like they don't have to be Muslim, because there are non-Muslims living in Turkey. Why? So it's kind of, their secrecy became the kind of like this prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy for conspiracy theories, basically. So hence this fear about minorities and their deeds is at the basis of conspiracy culture in Turkey. And therefore the Dönmes became a kind of like became a topic that became popular, because people believed it. Like you know, like it might be happening again. You know, like.
So in a sense, you're saying that it's tied to like the shift from an imperial system to a nation state, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, but in this shift was not willing; it was forced because of the like wars like that were lost against the independence movements of the minorities, and the Ottomans couldn't resist. Like bit by bit, they lost all the wars. And then the Turkish nationalism was very defensive, saying that we are not going to lose one more square meter to any minority or a foreign powers. So in that regard, there is always a kind of like suspicion about foreign powers and the minorities. They could kind of like, that's why Turkish state is quite not like quite kind of like it's imposing its own identity or minorities. It's not very multicultural as we know in the Western sense, because there's a deep down historically rooted suspicion, because from the Ottoman perspective, they also tried not only fighting, but they gave rights to many minorities in the 19th century. They became more liberal like in the empire, but it didn't work. And they kept losing the land. Therefore, they kind of like, there's a kind of like a suspicion about especially secret minorities. You know, like if you are a minority and if you're hiding yourself, and from a lay Turkish person, that might not be innocent because of the past.
Just getting onto the idea of the deep state, I suppose the deep state idea is slightly different, is it? In the sense that it's not targeting ethnic minority, but it's sort of targeting a hidden political faction. Is that right? Or could you just basically explain what is the deep
Sure,
state then?
sure. Deep state is a kind of like a group that is kind of like it's believed to be a group within the state. There's again like a secret cabal of like a, but it is to protect the state by any means, illegal as well, through assassinations of political like a, but this is kind of like almost kind of like a group of assassins hired by the state, basically. It's kind of like it's a caricaturistic way of putting it. So, and basically like and many of the unexplained events in Turkish history was tied into this deep state idea. It's like a gladio, like from the Cold War.
I
It's a
feel like
kind of
we
gladio.
should explain briefly what Gladio is. So Gladio is this kind of stay behind operation, right? Where like the idea is that there's secret far right groups that were going to be left in Europe in the event of a Soviet invasion during the Cold War. Is that right?
Exactly. You did it better than me, so thanks. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. I mean, yes, and that's kind of like a that kind of group is like is thought to be in Turkey, like, and this started in the 1970s by leftist groups. Basically, they stated that yes, far right kind of like militants were targeting them. Then they said the state is protecting them and they are attacking us, and therefore yes, they thought it's like Gladio like a group exists in Turkey in as a deep state is a kind of like a behind the state operations, basically, kind of like a, but it's kind of like allowed or organized by the state secretly to basically to destroy political opponents to the regime.
Right. And how has it been used by different like political actors? Because I think one thing that I saw in your research was that it's used by pretty much everybody across the political spectrum, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I did this research on parliamentary records in Turkey, and basically I looked at the uses of the word deep state in the parliamentary debates in the 90s and early 2000s. And basically, um, yes, I mean, each actor uses it in its own way. So basically, for example, first, like a left wing, like politicians always track back certain events. Like there was a kind of political violence in one of the Labor Day in 1978, and there was many people died because of like unexplained events. Like somebody was shooting and then panic and there was a panic in the crowd, and therefore, unfortunately, many people died. And but nobody found who did this, basically, like who were responsible from this from 1978. And left-wing politicians would say deep state was behind it. Let's make a commission to investigate this. But the other political actors did not follow suit, so they don't. They basically ignore. They don't say anything. Hence, there's no. But then, in another context, Kurdish kind of like a minority politicians come out and then basically say certain events happening in the southeast Turkey as a kind of like as an act of deep state, and then they say let's open a commission, and nobody, it's the same thing, and then Islamists complain about secular groups, and then in the same way, but nobody basically, it's basically very partisan conspiracy theory, and nobody kind of like the others do not really come together to investigate it. So it's just only the group that's kind of like that claims to be the victim of it speaks out, and then the rest just kind of turns a blind eye, and therefore it lives on because nobody does anything about it. So it's kind of like it becomes a kind of like almost kind of like a mythological figure and cultural figure. And if there's an unexplained event your group is a victim of, you could attribute it to deep state in Turkish politics. And unfortunately, they never came together to establish a commission to look into these events deeply.
So knowing Turkey's history of, several military coups, do you think that there's any sort of credibility to the idea of the deep state? Or is it just wholly this kind of rhetorical or political device that people are using to suit their own needs?
I think like I will take the comfortable sociological chair on that question, and I would basically argue that it doesn't matter the real existence of it. It only matters is the social construction of it. Like I think there was one quote. I don't remember who that was, but what people believe as truth has real effects. Therefore, when I look at conspiracy theories, yes, some of them are really convincing. And sometimes when I was researching, I was reading the content of these theories. At times I was believing in them. But then usually what happens is if you read more on the topic, eventually you realize that there's a conspiracy theory. I mean, not all of them, because some conspiracy theories could be true. I mean, Watergate scandal in the United States was a conspiracy theory in the beginning, and it turned out to be true. So there's no guarantee that it should be false. So, but I don't really, because I can't know. I don't have the means to investigate that. Let alone all the powerful politicians cannot investigate something. As a sociologist, I think I lack power to do that. So what I do is basically I look at the impacts of it, impacts of the belief of the conspiracy theory.
I see what you mean, because I think something that I've come to conclude in my own research is that a lot of the time, even when there may be some grain of truth to a conspiracy theory, what somebody does with that grain of truth is totally up to them. Like you were saying, like the impacts can be so, I don't know, they can just be blown out of all proportion or used in a particular way for a particular political agenda. So yes, I think you're kind of right that in a sense it's almost like the question of truth is almost irrelevant. Something that I found interesting about the idea of the deep state is the way that it started in Turkey, but it seems to have spread pretty much all around the world by now. You see it being used in the United States in particular, but also recently, like in Britain, we had former Prime Minister Liz Truss openly use the language of the deep state. And I was just wondering, like, firstly, do you know how has it spread across the world? How did it get out there? And secondly, why do you think it has become so sort of easy to use, easy for people to sort of use, and intuitive, I suppose?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. I also, there is not only, it's not only, Turkey doesn't only export like a goods, but also conspiracy theories, it seems. So there was another like a argument about a certain group in Turkey, parallel state. And I know that in Romania they have this, they use it. So I don't know, like I think it's a great question. I think there's no research on this in the literature, how they export and then how they spread. And it could be a nice social network of it. I don't know where they hear each other, but it's very interesting. I don't know, like as you said as well, like in the last question, like a grain of truth. Maybe there's some grain of truth in there, but then maybe it's not the complete reality, but it's just partly. And that kind of like maybe they kind of like become that shared among many countries. Maybe I'm not saying it exists, but like so that they could just use it. And actually, in the United States they used it. I know, but then I missed the point Liz Truss made. But like seeing that sudden event, like a sudden issues out of power could kind of like like yeah, yeah, it's a good question. Sorry, I don't have an answer, but yeah, there's something to, I think, research.
Did you say you hadn't heard about the Liz Truss one?
That, yeah, I didn't hear about that. I just heard it now because I didn't follow that she used the word deep state. Yeah,
She was appearing at APAC, the American Conservative
yeah.
Conference, and she was appearing on a panel with Steve Bannon. And when he was asking her about her fall from power, she said that it was all down to members of the deep state in the media and in the civil service and everything. And I don't know, it was just kind of very noteworthy from my perspective, because a lot of the time this sort of rhetoric is very implicit in British politics, but in that case, it came to the fore. It came, very explicit and very overt, and something we hadn't really seen before. But yeah, I guess that's another case though, where you were saying about different countries kind of borrowing from each other. I feel that American conspiracy theory rhetoric influences so much of British
Exactly.
conspiracy theory rhetoric.
There's like anti-Semitic rhetoric, like it's spread
Mm.
around the world and it's used by different countries in different times. So I think, yeah, it is, yeah, no, like this fascinating. And I think, like, for example, I think I remember in the UK, the conspiracy theories about the death of Princess Diana.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they explicitly used the word deep state, but it was something around there. Like the concept was, I mean, although it wasn't named as such, I think it was something as such, like a deep kind of like a secret operators in the state that's kind of trying to prevent her to marry like a, the Egyptian like a.
Yeah, I think I'd never thought of it like that before. I think that's a good point. And I think there's a similar thing with this is a bit more obscure, but it was a big deal when I was very young was the death of Dr. Kelly. I'm trying to remember what his first name was. He was called something like Dr. David Kelly. And he
Yeah.
was this have you heard of this? This is
It's the guy who said there's no weapons of mass destruction.
yeah, that's it. And there was a
And
whole
he goes
story
for a
about
walk in Oxford, and then he's dead. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and there was lots of talk at that time as well about whether this had been a official state assassination, basically.
Yeah,
I
but
sp-
yeah, there's no word for deep state, but explicitly, but it's kind of like implicitly there, kind of.
yeah, just to bring us back to Turkey, though, what role do you think like Erdogan has made of conspiracy theories? Can you say a bit about that? About has he like? I'm assuming that he too has used the deep state rhetoric.
Yeah, he used it like in various situations. And there's one interesting event. There was a religious there's a Gulen movement. It's a movement that basically was behind the attempted coup in 2016, and they were actually allied with Erdogan for a long time. And towards the end, like towards I think 2013 onwards, they became kind of like they were kind of like clashes between these AKP, I mean the Erdogan's movement and the Gulen movement, and some members of the Gulen movement organized the coup, and that didn't happen. But then by that time they were called parallel states. And actually there's a strange thing about this. Like the idea there is they are a state within the state, but they only work for their own lands, kind of like. But then somehow there's kind of like it was kind of this conspiracy theory became actually there was a conspiracy because they actually at the end attempted to do a coup and they failed and they ran away all of them so it is kind of like there's this strange mix of conspiracy theory and conspiracy in real life in that case. And yeah, Erdogan used this, and Erdogan also used this parallel state like a rhetoric, and also he also used a different rhetoric about the Gezi Park movement. There was a liberal kind of like very kind of like a protest movement. It's like Occupy style in Turkey about the destruction of a park at the center of Istanbul. I don't know if you have ever been to Istanbul, but Istanbul is very kind of like a it's all buildings. There's no park there. It's kind of like it's kind of a bit suffocating to me. I grew up there, so I could say that, I suppose. So, and one of the last parks was about to demolish, and people protested, and then it turned out to be a kind of the police basically repressed it, and it became a big movement in all around Turkey called Gezi Park movement. And actually, Erdogan said this was a foreign powers conspiracy because his argument was he claimed that the Turkey was booming economically, and foreign powers tried to prevent that by kind of like by basically by agents that started this movement, and it turned out to be a big kind of thing, like basically create a mayhem in Turkey to kind of like to stop the progress and peace in Turkey. That was his conspiracy theory about that.
Would you say there's like a tendency in populism? Because I guess would you describe Erdogan as a populist? I suppose he is, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
But do you think there's like a kind of tendency in populism, or specifically his kind of politics, I suppose, towards conspiracy theorizing with that kind of because in populism there's that sort of very similar distinction between the evil elite and the good people, and in conspiracy theories you've got the evil conspirators and the victims or the general population.
Yeah, like kind of Manichaean worldview about
Yeah.
between good and evil. Yeah, I mean, but like the thing is, to like what is interesting about Erdogan's political career is that yes, in the first half of like his party has been ruling Turkey since 2002, and in the first 10 years, they were the subject of conspiracy theories. Actually, there were many conspiracy theories arguing that Erdogan or like the people who support him could be like this crypto-Judaic. So there was kind of books about that and actually implying, and actually one of those Effendi books were talking about some of the Islamists as being kind of secret Jews, like a part of the Dönme community. And Erdogan didn't actually, basically, there was not even a direct response to that. But after 2013, after being the topic of conspiracies, he becomes the kind of like he uses different conspiracy theories to blame other people. So it's kind of like it's a strange thing. So yes, you could loosely tie it to his politics, but then not in the entire term of his rule, because he has been ruling for about 22 years in Turkey. And I think the first half, he didn't use that much. And he was actually the subject of conspiratorial accusations. But then he somehow, like, I don't know, like, he took it on. And then, like, he basically blamed others. So it's very strange, yeah.
Right. And just to kind of bring us towards an end, are conspiracy theories in Turkey, how have they been influenced by things like COVID? In the current moment, are they still a big deal? Is like the rhetoric of the deep state that's still going on today? Or is there a change in that rhetoric, or is it becoming weaker? Is it sort of disappearing?
I think it's like like the idea that I talked about the Serb syndrome. Like there's the conspiratorial fears or anxieties stay within the culture and lives in the culture, but it comes out in different periods. For example, the conspiracy theories about dönmes came out in 3 periods in Turkish democracy. So like not even before democracy. Yes, there are 3 periods. So in the sense that deep state conspiracies could come out in given the occasion. So if there's a big event that is kind of like that could explain by it, they could become popular. So I think the conspiracy is kind of cultural thing. I think it's shaped by the anxieties. And if there is kind of like if some people link it to them successfully meaning kind of like in a way that could make sense to the general population, then it could come back. And it's a cultural thing, I suppose. So in a way that's kind of like I can't say it finished. I mean, like, or like it might not come back. Like, and also, did you ask anything about COVID or?
Oh yeah, no, guys, just saw briefly when I was looking online that you'd written about COVID-19 conspiracy theories as well.
This is an interesting case, for example, that didn't hold much in Turkey, because I think the main conspiratorial theme in Turkey is foreign powers and minorities. So conspiracy theories about COVID had a very small population to believe, and the vaccination rates was high. Although there was a lot of debate about vaccination, there wasn't kind of like much, and there wasn't much anti-vaccine, not dominant or like or actually at least like a feared like anti-vaccine campaigns, like in Europe or like elsewhere. So it's strange. It didn't hold much.
That's a kind of positive note on which to end, I suppose, that
Yeah, yes,
vaccination is less of a controversial issue in Turkey. So thanks very much for speaking with me. It's been really great.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks to Dr. Türkay Salim Nefes there for a really interesting chat about the role of conspiracy theories in Turkish politics and their influence on politics around the world. This has been another episode of Academic Perspectives on Conspiracism. Our soundtrack is Spy Music by Echo Cinematics, and I hope to see you again next time.